Hello, everyone, and welcome to the unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about Unreal Engine and candied humbugs. We're your hosts, Alex and Jacob. I was going to let Jacob say his own name, and then I stopped it. Sorry, Jacob. But before we get started, please remember to like and subscribe and follow us on all the socials, wherever you watch and listen, so that you can hear more of our episodes whenever they come out. It's a bit of an irregular schedule, but we hope it's worth it for all these fun discussions that we have. Today's a bit of a special episode, isn't it, Jacob?
It sure is, and I do apologize for that irregular schedule. That's entirely my fault. I want everyone to know that that one's on me, because I have a bad tendency to get through editing, and then it's just that next step. I just gotta get it done. So I'm sorry. I am sorry, but hopefully you enjoy the episodes. Hopefully we can keep making them. But it's a special day today because we got some guests with us.
Woo! Special holiday episode. With us today is the infamous Debbie Deere and Ari Tarr. Say hello, guys.
What's up, everybody? Hello. Unmuting, it's a challenge. But yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Hello.
Excellent.
All right.
And why do we have them here today, Jacob?
That's a good question. So, for avid listeners of the podcast, of which there has to be some of you, I'm sure. We're just getting started, but I'm sure we have some avid listeners at this point. We'll remember from last episode, we mentioned that Alex had a performance coming up of the Christmas Carol in VR, Pixel Stream, Cloud Stream, Tech Packed. It's really quite cool.
Using Unity. No, just kidding.
Yeah, using Unity, of course. And it's just wrapped up. And we thought it would be a good chance to bring on some cool people to chat about that project, to chat about Unreal Engine. So without further ado, why don't we give them a chance to introduce themselves? Debbie, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, so I'm Debbie Deere. I'm from Jamaica originally. I'm actually here vacationing now, hence the pineapple shirt. And I'm a performer. I'm a VR, XR enthusiast. I'm a producer, writer, director. I have ADHD, but I've channeled it, into something.
Oh, we lost you, Debbie. Sorry.
We lost you for a second there.
Oh. We'll give her a second to come back.
Yeah,
it's part of the ADHD. It just makes things break up into different pieces. Yeah,
sure. All right, do you want to get started while we let her reconnect?
Absolutely. Hello. I am not currently in Jamaica. I'm in the United States. My name is Ari Tarr, and I have been an actor most of my life, and I came into doing creating XR content about 8 years ago after creating a lot of sort of projection mapping sets for theater and interactive installation experiments. And I now teach VR theater at York University coming up next year, and also with a Canada Council of the Arts funded fellowship that Debbie Deere and I are partnering on, which is the conversations we have, which was the connection that brought her into this project, which is something I'm really grateful for. So, welcome, Debbie. I think we have Debbie back with us.
I think so. Okay, should I do like a news anchor thing? And we're back. Sorry about this. These folks. So as I was saying, I was in on this project with Alex and Ari as three ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future, as well as Dickens's long lost, unrequited fiance, which I didn't know existed. So it was
lost.
Long lost, yeah. So it was an extremely interesting project. But to just tie it into what Ari was saying, I'm also the fellowship director for the PXR conference. Some of your enthusiasts or your avid listeners will know that it is a Canadian-based VR/XR conference in Canada. It's the only of its kind that focuses on live performance. Started off as a presenter last year, and now I'm actually directing the fellowship. So Ari and I will be making magic and, doing the Unreal Engine dance, which I'll talk a little bit about.
Yeah. And before
Awesome.
we go too much further, I just want to establish, because most of our audience has seen us talk about very technical, like in the weeds Unreal Engine things. Debbie, Ari, would either of yourselves consider yourselves Unreal Engine developers?
Double down on that another time, Alex, please.
You want to answer for yourself, Ari, first?
Yes, I will. I actually none at all. I have developed a lot of VR theater experiments and shows, but it's always been based in Unity, and I've always been interested in Unreal Engine. But in my experience up until this point, really the only thing that has allowed my entry to doing regular shows is a mobile headset. Right when I started with Adventure Lab, and that allowed me to get a really an audience from around the world to start seeing these shows regularly. And so I really didn't think it was going to be a possibility. What I teach right now, for instance, at the university level, there's a whole lot to learn, even with the kind of low poly stuff that typically the Quest is known for, with the GPU that's on board a mobile headset. So it's fairly limited, but there's still like a lot you can do there before you get to like photorealism that Unreal Engine can do. And then I got to work with Alex last year doing some really innovative cloud XR stuff, and we partnered with Actors Theater of Louisville. So really, between this kind of the ability to do it and the housing of this really legitimate theater producing it, it was a really amazing first taste of what can be done with like incredibly gorgeous looking, realistic metahumans with full body and face tracking, with cloud XR spinning of GPUs so that someone could watch it on a Quest. And it's easy to say, it's much harder to do, and it's all juggling so many different kinds of pieces of software at its fringe. So everything is a very precarious balance held together with tape and glue. But the fact that we could do it, I think, is pretty monumentous, because it's a little taste of how this kind of production is going to work several years down the road. Virtual production plus XR, it's really, we define these things as separate genres, but they're all becoming a lot more fluid as XR tech gets better. So who knows where we're going to be by then, but it's definitely going to involve Unreal Engine in some way.
Debbie, how about you?
Well, for me, I'm an Unreal Engine developer by proxy.
Mm.
So like it diffuses into my blood through people like Jason Spanu, who was the Unreal Engine developer for Nefertiti, which is the VR film I was talking about. And how that came about was, it was originally supposed to be a play, and then COVID happened, and I saw him messing around with Unreal, and then I was watching The Mandalorian a lot, and I was like, how did they do that? So he said, that's mixed reality. Like, we could do that with Unreal Engine. And he smokes a lot of weed. So I was like,
that.
Yeah, I was like, is this like a high inspiration thing, or can we actually do it? And it synchronistically happened that I had access to a free green screen studio for like 4 months, and I would be in there with him for 4 months, like working day in and day out, learning this program, and like literally working with a guy named Josh. I can't remember his last name, but Josh works with very high end companies on Unreal Engine productions. And he would come in and light our sets and like show us all this programming, like asymmetry. And we went the gamut of Unreal Engine to try and get the perfect composite. And so I would say that I don't know the inner workings that well, but I know my way around Unreal. And I've only done 2 VR projects, and both of them happen to be in Unreal. The second one is a VR story called Found in Stories, and it's based on African diasporic stories from a character called Anansi, who is our Spider-Man. And that came about because I was being mentored in the Scale Up Immersive program. And of course, Jason, he's my lifesaver. So I was like, I need you. And it was Unreal again. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's my story.
Yeah.
Well, so clearly some very diverse backgrounds here, and some really awesome projects that you guys have worked on. I think it's worth taking a step back to describe what the Christmas Carol is from a high level view, and then I'll let Alex maybe take it and dive into some of the details of the production, and we'll start passing it around. But I want folks who are listening at home to have an idea of kind of what we're chatting about, and I'll just jump right into it. And so the Christmas Carol, I first learned about this production because Alex was working on this cool Cloud XR thing, and somehow ended up on my desk, so to speak, at the company I work for. And I was very excited to see this work because actually I think Alex was one of the first people probably in the world to leverage this in a real way, which I was very excited to see. And Alex, I know there's a team around you, so that's not to blow your horn too much. But that said, it was really exciting to see. And what the Christmas Carol does is provide a window into this production that you just really can't get. Ari was mentioning these limitations with mobile headset GPUs, and so this process or this production utilized cloud streaming. So you spin up GPUs in the cloud, you render stuff, and then you're streaming it to a headset. In this case, or this year, it was also streamed to a browser, which was cool to see. And it's really a fantastic experience. I really recommend that everyone check it out. It sounds like Alex wants to do this every year. And I encourage that because it's really quite cool. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check it out yet, definitely do. But there's an incredible amount of technology and a really awesome cast of folks who I've seen from the outside really put together something special with live performance in VR and all sorts of really cool tech. So I'm really excited to chat about this. But I don't even know if that was a good overview or if it was just me fanboying about it. But that's what it is. And I'll pass over to Alex to maybe explain it a little better.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too much into the details of all this. Everyone should watch my GDC talk if they want to see a really deep dive into where this all came from. But the short version, just for our podcast audience, is that there was already going to be a physical production of Christmas Carol performed by Actors Theater of Louisville last year, and they wanted us to produce in Unreal Engine videos that they could project onto scrims for their live actor performing there. And I thought, well, geez, if we're already going to have all these motion capture characters, like that would be so cool to see in VR. Could we also do a live VR performance? And they said, sure. And I said, do you think the actor who's going to play Scrooge on stage wants to have like a motion capture suit under his costume? Because we can maybe do that. And they're like, no, he doesn't really want to do that. And I was like, well, there's a guy I know who I've been wanting to work with in a meaningful capacity for a while, who I think would love to be, potentially the one-man show of this. So that was Ari. And I know Ari was very inspired by like the Patrick Stewart one-man version of a Christmas Carol that he saw when he was much younger. And so last year it was just Ari as a single actor. And we had kind of a wish list after last year, which was, just Ari, just VR, a few other limitations for what could happen for the audience that we wanted to expand upon for this year. We really wanted to be able to add an additional performer. So that's how Debbie came in. And we really wanted to make it accessible to people who didn't have VR headsets. So that's where pixel streaming and also the YouTube live stream was able to come in, which I also thought had some nice advancements in making a theater show cinematic. We had Carlos Austin, who's all around the VR scene, filming everything in there, including like Jason Moore's Meta Movie, among other productions. And I tried to set up a camera system for him so he could pretty easily switch between like ABC cameras at different moments throughout the scene. So that was a really fun thing to start to dive into. But I know we don't have a ton of time left with our actors, so I do want to give them a little bit more of a chance to talk about their experience, especially first and foremost as creatives and not people who needed to be in the guts of Unreal Engine, like moving things around. So thinking about this from a motion capture, a puppeteering, a mask work, a dramaturgy perspective, I'd love to hear both Ari and Debbie talk a little bit about how it felt translating their performance through this lens.
Your theater audience is just clamoring to know all the juicy theater details.
Yeah.
I mean, the main thing is, even though I didn't have Unreal Engine development experience, and to defend Unreal Engine developers who smoke weed is just for it to be a very professional person who does not use psychoactive substances. It is still very psychedelic just to talk about the basics of using this medium creatively and professionally, especially. So, working last year, Robert Fleming, who was the director, was and really incredible and has an incredible understanding of of the language of Dickens and the time, and really we did a deep dive into the history, and he especially wanted to create a version that included the people that were being colonized by the British Empire at the same time, and it's been very interesting also to learn as I dove deeper into this production. It's like actually A Christmas Carol was one of the most popular pieces to be interpreted in stereoscopic photography, which is very early VR, and also by the Magic Lantern, which was pre-cinema, but this was sort of like a pre-cinema with these hand animated photographs that were projected. And so, in new technology has been used to tell this very same story for actually since the 1850s. So, but I think, and I have a lot of experience trying to tell stories with new technology, whether it's projection mapping and doing it in Unity. I made a prototype in 2016 to do something that was very similar. That back then we had to write all of our basically everything from scratch, and what I learned was how to keep a cool head, and doing fringe tech means that something's going to be breaking all the time, and so you just have to, whatever you end up doing, you do a version of it, and you have backups for your backups, and that is the current state of where it is. And how sketchy it felt kind of back in 2016 is where this feels now, and I definitely think this is obviously where things are going, but it's not easy. It's not easy to do this, and mostly I think the skill that I trained myself, that I brought to this, is just keeping a cool head and being able to communicate despite all of the turbulence and the friction between you and the audience, and still somehow making a connection through a game engine and all kinds of dicey internet connections where it's basically one number different, and instead of doing a sensitive show with an audience member, you're creating a horrible David Cronenberg nightmare.
Especially when you take a motion capture suit off and it just kind of crumples into this spider body. Yeah. And to draw a difference between Ari's performance and Debbie's. So Ari was wearing a Rococo suit, had a Technoprops helmet with live link face, and whenever he was live, some parts were pre-recorded. It was his whole body and his audio. Debbie, on the other hand, because we weren't able to get her a motion capture suit, she had the interesting challenge of having live link face for her face and audio with her voice, but her body was actually all of the pre-recorded movements from the original production. So yeah, Debbie, how did that feel?
That felt really weird initially because you do feel disassociated, right? Like you have the urge to like make movements, make it your own, but of course you're completely reliant on your face. That's it. Your face, your eyebrows, your tone of voice, which Ari really helped to work through me. For those of you who haven't seen it, Ari plays 1,001 characters. Like, he goes from burly Cockney man to like 6-year-old girl, the whole gamut. And I was just really impressed. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing 4 characters in this thing. How do I modulate with just my face? Right. So I feel like it was an interesting challenge. And I do feel that as a performer, it highlights your skill set and your ability to deliver a performance in a way that doesn't hinge on body movements, So that's what I would say was really interesting. I could go deeper into the live link aspect if you want. So for me, I have a background in tech in that I've always skirted around it, like I've been like an inputter of tech things, editor, like always loved it. So for me, like communicating in that language, even if it's unfamiliar, it still tickles my brain. So I will say, anyone who's planning to do this, brush up on your tech skills, just basic coding, basic like navigation for terminal. because this is kind of like the gateway to bridging your face into this software. And I'm sure, Alex, you'll go deeper into that at some point. And as Ari was saying, like in the event of inevitable tech issues, definitely brush up on your improv skills
and patience.
and patience.
So Debbie, given that you said you were kind of skirting around tech for a while, now that how has this experience maybe changed your point of view? What was your experience working with Unreal or real time in general on this project? Like, what is it that excites you? What do you feel still needs to be fixed? That kind of stuff.
Well, what excites me is the ability to like instantly switch a character in a scene. Mm-hmm. Like that is mind-boggling, like it's just next level quantum leaping right before your eyes. And the nerd in me is just absolutely tickled by that. And I think the potential of what that could do, it would probably fry a few people's brains, but those who got used to it would just be like, this was worth it. Because it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal to watch. So I think that piece is knowing we're on the periphery right now, but imagine like 2-3 years from now, like it's going to be wild. So
sure,
that's one bit, and it's changed my thought process. In again, it's a process getting to know how do you make these tools communicate well and like make the audience not feel the pain of the production. Because that at this stage is a huge challenge, like making it go just like inherently smoothly, like a regular in real life theater show. So I think that it's changed my perspective on what's possible, and it excites me a lot to work on something like this again.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say is the biggest drawback? Like, what is it that you think is not as good as you thought, or you think just doesn't work?
I think what is the biggest drawback is just like troubleshooting. That's really it. Like constantly having to re-input information, take information out. You have to be very agile, not to pun, but you do have to be quick on your feet. And that can be taxing for, people like myself. Also, I think what could have worked better was like Ari, you're brilliant. Like you can play all these characters, but I think having more access to other characters as he embodied them would have been great,
Sure. Yeah. So Alex, go ahead.
I was going to say quickly too. So I think a lot of people, they think about these tools that we have access to, the motion capture, face, body, et cetera, and they assume that it's a one-to-one translation. This is a perfect representation of your performance. And without spoiling what I know both of you would say, like, how do you take someone who's like, it must be so cool to have this perfect, translation of what you're doing into a digital medium? Is that how you think of it? Or is there a little bit of a twist on it?
The ideal is so wonderful, right? This infinite expressive tool. However, I find so much I go back on the lower tech skills of like of mask and puppetry, because as I learned to use motion capture live software, Coco feeding into and LiveLink feeding into Unreal Engine, inevitably it's not going to work perfectly. And so you have to make it work and deliver the engine. And if the mocap suit is doing this for some reason and you find that you have to compensate and you have to stay calm and you need to now do this with your hand behind your back because that's how it's going to look normal, that's something you're adapting with on the fly. So you're constantly, as a live actor and able to think on your feet, you're able to spackle over all of the glitches and make the audience's precious time, if they have been able to jump the technical hurdles to get to a live experience with you, to make their time worth it, despite all of the technical glitches. And often we find, depending on how many there are, sometimes glitches can even improve the performance. And like that high wire act, as you said, it's very important to remind people that this is actually live space you're inhabiting with other people, to like really trigger those mirror neurons. Before we go though, I think Debbie got to air some Unreal laundry. I have my Unreal shout out before we go.
Great.
That I'm curious about. Anyway,
Well, I'm just gonna shout out firstly Matt Workman, who doesn't know me at all. But
We've shouted him out a couple times in this podcast already. Yeah.
Matt Workman is so incredible because without Matt Workman, there would probably not have been a Nefertiti, to be honest, because we like comb through those videos and that's how we establish our workflow. So YouTube University, Matt Workman, get on it if you haven't gone on it already. And I guess I don't really have a big gross. I mean, Unreal Engine, like the biggest thing, which we all know, is going from 4.27 to, is it 5 or just right?
We're in 5.1 now. Yeah.
5.1. That's what I'm. So obviously for those of you who are developers, like, you know, that it crashes. Like if you try to like, import projects, I don't even want to talk about it, so these are building.
The trauma is still fresh.
It's so new. It's too soon. Yeah.
I mean,
so
live theater with any technology is you're asking for pain, but with XR technology, it's cubed. The pain is exponential. It's rough, but it is possible. Yes, and it is worth it. But also, I think you have to be a little bit obsessed, and maybe it is a little sprinkle of. I do find that there is a bit of neurodiversity in those who stick with VR because most sane people are like, this doesn't work yet.
Yeah, but, true.
Yeah,
but we are capable of so much. I mean, the interesting thing was it was last year's version of Christmas Carol was a fairly literal interpretation of the simultaneous live version, and it was very by the book and it was very well done. And this one, we still get to do that, but just we got to sort of open it up a little bit as using Unreal Engine as kind of this expressive tool, this kind of magic lantern of the imagination that Dickens used to call it. And I think next year, as we just loosen things up even a little bit, like what if the audience can change? What scale they see the show? I mean, are they a firefly? Are they in the room hovering around your face? Are they in the room with you? Are you a tiny maybe puppet show happening on the table? Like how we're just starting to see how using these platforms can make people feel in brand new ways. And Unreal Engine has the ability especially to shout out to MetaHumans is an amazing software. And that was a watershed moment where, correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that we're doing this is all of a sudden we had access to using these mocap tools, which were fairly prosumer, that were accessible at least, but the MetaHumans that they just that they released are incredible. And so I think up until now, there's sort of a lot of questions that we haven't had to think about. But now when you have an incredibly realistic looking person with a realistic looking race, that opens up a lot of really interesting questions and sex and gender. And like, okay, all of a sudden we were these sort of low poly cartoonish avatars. But as we're moving into really realistic representations of people, how does that change how we feel about them and how do we treat that ethically? And these are the kind of questions that I'm really glad that people like Debbie are in the conversation for, because they shouldn't be made by people like Mark Zuckerberg.
No. So both of you, before you jump, what I want to know is if the tech issues were fixed, if you had all the pain wiped away, what is it that you would do? What production would you want to make? What kind of stuff would you want to do with this technology if it all worked in this magical world?
No crashes, no bugs,
no wires, no batteries.
Well, I mean, so Nefertiti just got accepted to Fringe Festival this year. So woo. And I was talking with I'm not gonna say the company name, but they're known for immersive theater, and it's big venues, like 52 projectors, all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing if we could get this done. But then I always think about the hardware, hardware just makes it harder. So I would want to just completely extricate that hardware and just get a wearable that just puts you more in the action. And if not that, like a simple wearable, like a contact, or not even goggles, but something that just makes you forget that you are actually having to put something on to immerse. But I think the next best thing is like some kind of projection or hologram that kind of merges with that, VR world. So the world is a construct in VR, but the hologram puts the action in front of you, and
Right.
you in it.
Cool.
So,
Yeah. Sounds good.
Matt Workman, hello.
Okay, I got two real quick. Can I put them out there?
Great.
The future use that I want to see with Unreal Engine is definitely in therapy, especially I was in med tech for a little while, building worlds for live therapy sessions, and I got to meet Skip Rizzo, who's curing PTSD using VR immersion therapy with veterans. And there's a lot more that Unreal Engine could do of, if there are ways that we can use Unreal Engine for therapy to recreate really realistic memories of trauma that can then be cleansed for some people. I think that's a really wonderful use of that. I think via, and the more I use VR to recreate immersive theater, it's all about empathy and a lot of, not to get all high and mighty and start turning this into Patch Adams, but artists as healers has had a lot of history there. So it's interesting. And the FDA just approved VR for medical use. The other one is in education, and so obviously I'm teaching VR theater, but I can't help thinking about metahumans and its relation to anthropology. So I would really love to figure out more. If I had my druthers, I would understand what is operating behind metahumans and how are you changing skeletal structure, and how could you recreate ancient humans, especially Australopithecines, and create like very realistic anthropological recreations of Paleolithic humans. I think would be really important for studying these fields.
Cool. Well, those are some pretty big ideas, guys. So we'll we'll tell
I thought I would
get on it.
Context. Right? That's awesome.
We'll tell Epic to get right on it. We'll let Matt Workman know for sure. Matt Workman, I mean, if you're listening, you're always welcome on the podcast. I don't know if we've said that.
Eyes.
We may have said that before, but
because I'll do it if I get golden
twice.
eyes.
Awesome. Well, we want to let you go, guys. Thank you so much for your time. The moment you leave, just so you know, we're going to keep talking about you. So don't feel anxious about that. It's going to be great.
I got this. You got this. It's recorded either way, so I'll be watching you.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah. There's a record. Right. Oh no.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Happy holidays.
And happy holidays.
Bye. Happy holidays.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. That was fun.
That was fun. I definitely, before we end this episode, I want to chat more about the tech behind this and how this happened. I guess we could just jump right into it. I mean, what is it that made you want to do this in this way? Like we heard a lot about pain and suffering. Like what made you think, hey, this could be worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big theater geek, and I had kind of a watershed moment when I was in college studying abroad in London, watching some of the best performers in the world across dance and theater and music. Very, very close. We had this professor who always was able to get us like in the first couple rows of all the shows we went to. And I didn't realize how different a live performance felt from a world-class performer when you're 6 feet away from them, compared to being in the nosebleed seats, compared to being in the front row with like amateur performers, and compared with watching those very same performers who are world-class in the cinema. A close-up in film is very, very different from you are sitting 6 feet away from them and it's live. And so ever since then, that was 2008, I've kind of been chasing this idea of how could that actually be democratized and be turned into something that could be more accessible to the general public, because most people in the world, 99.99%, are never going to get to go to London and have the experience I had in particular. So when metahumans came out, when cloud computing started to become more of a thing, when live link face and other motion capture technology started to become more accessible, I started to think, how cool would it be to see that level of translation of an actor's performance into a digital format that's happening live that could then be viewed by people from all over the world. And you could feel that same sensation of being 6 feet away from a world-class performer, particularly in VR, because then you get that sense of scale and presence, and these nuances become apparent that, again, you just don't get from something like a flat close-up in film, which is what you would get if you were seeing the 2D YouTube live stream of that kind of experience. So I really wanted to have that moment of being up close to Ari and Debbie when they're like right in character doing their thing. And it's happened a few times during rehearsal, during the show, and it gives me goosebumps, and it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, it is really cool to see. And you don't really recognize I mean, so I should say this year I watched it via pixel streaming because I ran too late and I didn't get it sideloaded. And I was like, okay, I got to just
VR
figure this out.
process is too cumbersome right now.
Yeah. But I watched it via in VR last year, and I was just amazed because there was just so much that I felt was missing from VR in terms of visual fidelity, especially on the the mobile headsets. And I mean, it wasn't even that you couldn't achieve, decent looking graphics on something like a Quest. It was more that you made so many sacrifices to get there, right? And you kind of, I mean, there are people who navigate it well. Good examples being things like Robo Recall, and there's what was
Red
the one we were
Matter
talking
too.
about before? The Red Matter.
Yeah.
Like those games go way above and beyond to optimize and to really fine tune things. But I mean, to some extent, you can still see that. But when you jump into this experience, I remember just being like, wow, this really feels special. And then to have the live component there as well, where you're getting to interact with other people. There was a moment last year, and I think you guys treated it a little differently this year, but last year where everyone was a little like flame kind of floating around you, so all the other participants were there and you can kind of see them. They were kind of present, and that just added something really kind of fascinating and special to the experience. So I was pretty excited to see that it was possible to see the kind of visual fidelity that you could bring. So it was really exciting to see.
Yeah, thank you. And it was important to us to make the experience more accessible. So, VR to me feels like the most VIP premium way to see a show like this. But for a lot of reasons, people aren't going to necessarily do that. They don't have the VR headset. They don't want to deal with side loading, et cetera, et cetera. So being able to open this up to pixel streaming, just a single link to click, and now you're in a browser interacting with the show as though it was running on your computer, even though it's running in the cloud, and just a YouTube live stream, which is very passive. But
yeah,
nice
I didn't know you guys did
cool.
that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I think it was awesome. So you're going to do this every year, right?
I hope so. I think it's a wonderful little time capsule of the technology and passions that me and my other collaborators are so excited by, where we just did a post-mortem discussion, the whole team, of a couple hours ago, and half the discussion was, hey, here's how we felt about this year's production. And the other half was like, we're so excited for next year. What do we want to try to have in place for then? And that includes things like, we really want our actors to be in VR instead of using live link face. And all that technology is coming online now for that, where you can get a pretty high level of facial capture while someone is still in VR. And that allows for much more of a connection between the performers and their audience. So that'll be really cool.
And who knows, maybe we'll have XR in the browser, right? We'll have Web XR or something like that. That would be a fun addition to make things more accessible, right?
Yeah, Ari and I first started to get to know each other working in Mozilla Hubs, and that is a platform that I think is kind of a gold standard in terms of accessibility, because you go to a browser link and you click on it and it's like, oh, we detect that you have a VR headset. Would you like to join directly in your browser, or would you like to be in your VR headset? And it runs great on all these different platforms, but it is constrained by whatever hardware you're using. There's not a cloud component. So to do that, but it's like WebXR plus pixel streaming, that's kind of the holy grail of what would make this the ultra level of accessibility and really allow for amazing experiences.
Right. So from your perspective, what is the biggest thing you still want to improve? Like, where's this going, Alex?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, we were talking today earlier about how we would love to be able to do a show like this for 10,000 people. And what would that look like? Assuming some percentage watching a live stream, some percentage using browser pixel streaming, and some percentage in VR. And one of them was one version of this was a very interesting discussion about bypassing the typical Unreal Engine multiplayer system where everything has to be replicated in a certain way.
Yeah.
And instead actually sending out data in kind of a clever way that's already part of the cloud streaming system we use, where every client is kind of just telling everyone like, hey, here's my name and here's where I am. And how potentially, in theory, this system we're describing could allow for, let's say 10,000 people all in Unreal Engine, all as part of the same experience. As long as there's powerful enough hardware on the cloud to render everyone, there wouldn't necessarily be the same typical multiplayer limitations of that. It is so important to me to not just be part of a live experience, but to feel seen and feel like you're there with other people. My company did some work for Samsung a few years ago that was all about making you feel like you're at a live event through stereoscopic 360 cameras. And that was really cool, but it also felt very lonely. So what you were describing, Jacob, about like seeing all the other Ghost Flames in last year's production, like we were sorry to miss that this year. And we'd love to be able to bring that back because it is really cool to just get a sense of like, wow, everyone's congregating over there right now. I wonder what they're excited about. And to just feel like you're part of this other audience. Christmas Carol also lends itself well to that because there's a few moments in the traditional script and also in our script that refer to all these other ghosts, all these other spirits and specters that knew Scrooge in life. And so we like the idea of casting the audience as also all these other ghosts that are kind of collectively haunting Scrooge. So being able to give the audience more agency, more interactivity. We have a few great ideas for moments where the audience could work together to either help or hinder Scrooge's progress in the story. So there's a lot of really fun uses of Unreal Engine that we're excited to continue to explore,
Sure.
And this big long list of like things we want to do. It's like, awesome if we can do it in 2023. If not, we'll try to do it in 2024. So, what will be an Unreal Engine 5.8 or 6 or something like that.
Oh, we can hope, right? Well, one of the things you told me that stuck out was, it's pretty unique that you can just kind of put down a production and pick it back up, and just opening up the Unreal Engine file. Like that's a pretty cool thing, right? That's very unique.
Yeah, I was part of a theater troupe when I was in architecture school. We were actually called the Warehouse Architecture Theater, and it started as just architecture students. And we wanted to be very like green and sustainable. So rather than throwing away our sets at the end of every production, we actually got the school to give us a budget to store them. And it was such a hassle to try to like pull those sets back out, and some pieces had broke, and like to try to reuse them for different productions. And the Unreal Engine version of that is so easy. Like we just have our repo of Christmas Carol, and we can just, in theory, just keep pulling it out every year, dusting it off, creating a new branch or whatever to see what kind of experiments we want to do, and then remount it. So, the potential of this being a very low budget, lightweight, stable production. I say stable knowing that that's been a challenge so far, but I'd like to imagine we'll get to that point where it's very stable and easy to do year after year with a week of rehearsals before the actual production needs to start.
Sure, man. I mean, so everyone look out for next year. We'll certainly check back in, and hopefully we can look forward to another version of the Christmas Carol next year.
Yeah.
But why don't we push on to some other stuff? I know we had a few other things to touch on.
We do
before the end of the podcast.
One really quick thing I just wanted to shout out to give Ari credit here. So as he said, he's not an Unreal Engine developer, and yet he found the MetaHuman tools so easy to use when those first came out. I asked him if he wanted to take a pass at designing Scrooge. This was last year, just to see if he felt like he could create, like if he could sculpt a character that resonated with him. And like I'd made a version of Scrooge, and a few other people did who had more experience in Unreal, more experience in MetaHumans. And yet what Ari crafted on his own, first time using MetaHumans, I think it took him maybe an hour and a half, was brilliant. And it was almost like looking at for anyone who's seen like the appendices of Lord of the Rings, where you see the development of Smeagol and Gollum, and it slowly becomes a little bit more like Andy Serkis and this kind of almost caricatured version of him. Like the version of Scrooge that Ari crafted on his own using MetaHumans that we then incorporated into the show was really cool. And I just love that as a performer, he was able to take some ownership over that artistic process and bake that into the workflow. And that hasn't really been possible before.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. I think that one of the really cool things that Epic is doing with Unreal Engine as a platform is trying to make things more accessible for folks who are non-technical, and I think that's a really awesome thing. The fact that LiveLink, you can get an app on your iPhone and just hook it up, and yes, it still requires a bit of tweaking. It's not that simple, but if you hand the phone to someone and it's connected, you just hand it to an artist, they're going to get the idea immediately. There's not a whole lot of strings attached, and that's pretty cool, right? And it goes beyond that, right? There's just a ton of tools inside the engine now that are kind of aimed directly at that. There's tons of tools for people to build, that kind of layer for people on set or in a performance, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's just so cool to see that stuff. And the fact that it's just given out for free, MetaHumans, just give it out. Like, see what happens. Like, that's a pretty crazy concept. And so certainly that's an exciting thing about Unreal Engine in general.
Yeah, 100%. It was very cool. I might have mentioned this when I was discussing Korea, but showing people how to very quickly scan the head of someone using something like Polycam, put that in Unreal Engine, use the mesh to MetaHuman pipeline, create a MetaHuman out of the scan of that person, and then use LiveLink Face to puppeteer that person, which someone can then look at inside VR or in a looking glass or through pixel streaming. It's a very quick way to blow people's minds.
Yeah, sure. I actually, I don't know if I've seen that because I missed that part of your talk at Unreal Fest.
Yeah,
but I gotta see that because I haven't played around with MetaHuman as much as I would have liked, but pretty
it
cool.
keeps getting better. Yeah, I need to dive in and explore some of the new features as well. I should also mention, by the way, that Christmas Carol to this point was still in Unreal Engine 4.27. That was primarily because we were waiting for Lumen and Nanite to be compatible with VR, and we'd already kind of started production by the time 5.1 had stabilized, even though it still has a little ways to go before it's stable. So, by next year, of course, we'll certainly be in 5.1 or 5.2. And it's such an embarrassment of riches, the fact that we keep getting all these new features and free tools and the acquisitions that Epic makes that we get to take advantage of. I think, Jacob, you and I both just feel so lucky to be able to take advantage of so many of these things.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, this kind of brings me to a cool topic that I've been meaning to bring up, and that's this past few weeks, or really I guess about 2 weeks ago, there was an announcement about Verse. Did you hear about this?
I heard a little bit. Yeah, tell me more.
Yeah, so Tim Sweeney posted on Twitter, and I'm gonna find the post because I cannot for the life of me remember who the person was that gave the talk. But that they had been working on their own programming language for doing quote unquote metaverse programming inside of Fortnite. And look, I think no one is particularly surprised at this development, which is why it really wasn't all that big of an announcement. Also, people aren't as big nerds as Alex and I are, so they probably don't care about things like programming languages. Here it is. Simon Peyton-Jones gave the talk. The post is by Ian Kettlewell at Kettlecorn on Twitter. But it's a talk about this new language that they believe is going to be the tool that lets everyone become a part of developing the metaverse. And it's pretty fascinating. I spoke with a few folks with my work, some even bigger nerds than me, if you believe that, who think about things like writing programming languages, and it was pretty cool to see the reaction. I mean, the interesting thing is that the title slide and the title card is about, hey, do we really need a new programming language? Well, no, but it was a cool, we had some cool ideas, so we might as well. And that also kind of encapsulates Epic, right? Is we're getting all these features and they're like, do we really need to make this easier? No, I mean, the feature was already there. I mean, they've been doing this for a while. Features that are already there that you could already do, but we're going to make it just cooler. We're going to make it more accessible. We're going to make it easier for people to use. That's really awesome. So this programming language, I'm not going to go too deep. It's super functional. It's like, and functional is not like as in it works, as in like
it is a function logic language.
It is not very readable, is really what that means. I don't know how they're going to turn this into something that, I mean, they claim they want it to be as easy as JavaScript to learn. And I'm looking at this thinking, I don't know about that one. But it is pretty cool to see some of the things they've done here. It's a huge 60-something page document that outlines what they're thinking. But it's really quite interesting, and it kind of lends towards their broader goals and bringing accessibility to this thing that they're building, which presumably is Fortnite becoming the metaverse, right? Like, something like that. I don't think any of this is particularly surprising, but it is quite cool to see.
Yeah, that is really cool. All the articles are just like, this thing's going to topple C and C++, and they're very excitable.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the programming nerds out there who have used things like Haskell and such, no one really uses Haskell anymore, because the functional programming has been really replaced by object-oriented programming languages like Python and JavaScript, etc. But actually, people are probably going to get upset at me calling JavaScript really object-oriented. Forget about that. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get involved in this conversation.
Angry comments.
Yeah, all my point is to say is that there's lots of programming language out there. This is something that you can go really deep on. But if you just read the title card, the first few title cards, and just read about like, okay, here's what we want to do, like the goals, I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool, the goals that they laid out here. The fact that they're trying this, the fact that they're going to, put this in people's hands, they have the ability to put it in people's hands. Maybe 13-year-olds start programming in verse. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty cool. So
very exciting. Good rant, Jacob.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We got to pad the time out,
Yeah, I know. Well, I figured, so I think there's two more things that we should probably cover. This is probably our last episode of the year. So one would be just predictions, hopes, whatever we hope to see in 2023, maybe highlights of things that we were really excited about in 2022. And then I know, Jacob, that you're much more up to date than I am about all the exciting things happening with Fortnite. And I would just love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, why don't we start with Fortnite, and then we'll end with some nice predictions for the year.
Great. Go ahead. Hit me.
All right. So, I mean, this was exciting because my fiance and I, we play Fortnite together. It's one of the only games that doesn't make her nauseous to play because it's third person.
I'm surprised though, because you move so fast in Fortnite.
You would think.
Doesn't feel motion sick.
Wow. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's one of those games that we really enjoyed playing together. It's a lot of fun, and one day we loaded up Fortnite, and it was the start of a new season, which means you kind of get a new map or whatever. And I jump in, I was like, something looks different. Something's interesting here. And then we get in the game, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And all of a sudden, Fortnite was like the best looking game on the planet. And it was completely shocking. Because it's one thing to have a really good looking game. It's another thing for me to get a new looking game for free. And what I mean by that is, of course, I didn't pay for this upgrade, right? I didn't pay to get the new, Ultra HD version of the game, right? It's like the Last of Us remake that was like $60 still. Ridiculous. But I didn't pay for it. But I also didn't need to go out and buy a new GPU. I didn't need to, this wasn't like a battle for FPS. I didn't have to like think about, do I really need to buy a 3080, all that shit, right? I just got it, and it looked beautiful. It looked incredible. So what happened, for folks who don't know, is that the engine was or Fortnite was moved to Unreal Engine 5.1. And so in 5.1, we spoke about this last episode, all the huge stuff that came in this release. And now it makes even more sense why there was so much in this release. And it was because they were targeting this release for the next major version of Fortnite as well. So they had to pack as many features in as possible because they're all going live in Fortnite. But it was really exciting. So in this latest version of Fortnite, they utilized Nanite which means in particular what stands out is things like foliage and grass and surface detail, stuff like that. I mean, like trees and grass and like stuff like that just added so much to the general feel of the game and the immersion overall. And then Lumen, of course, they added now all the lighting in Fortnite is Lumen. So you get real-time shadows and just incredible global illumination. It just looks amazing. And if you don't believe me, if you've never played Fortnite, it's free. It's free, guys. Just download it, just load in, just to appreciate what Epic has done with this game, because it is beautiful. And it is a complete masterclass on Unreal Engine development. And it is really a showcase of all the features that are being built in Unreal Engine. So really, I recommend, if you haven't checked out Fortnite, you should, because it's really, like I said, pretty incredible. I can't understate that. It's just really awesome. It runs on a phone. It runs on everything. They lowered the minimum spec for the game and increased the visual fidelity, 10 times. That's like the holy grail, So I was shocked. My fiance was very upset because I would just be running around, and then I stopped. It was like, oh my God, look at that! Like they added subscattering in the leaves. I was like, oh my God! And then we get shot and die. We have to start over. But it was a good time.
What platform do you play on?
I play on PC. Yeah. So my fiance plays on the PS5 in the other room. I play on my PC here, and we have a very good time.
Yeah. Have you played with the I remember one of the more hilarious things to come out of the Apple and Epic legal battle was Fortnite becoming available via cloud streaming, just like the Safari browser. Have you tried it that way?
I actually haven't, surprisingly. I probably should. I also try it in a virtual workstation, stuff like that, and that works pretty well. I will say though, for Fortnite, like latency is very important if you want to be competitive. And I assume that was a concern for Epic as well. But I mean, what choice did they have, really? So I haven't tried it, but I would be open to it for sure.
Yeah, I tried it on my iPhone, and the resolution was incredible. And I was just wondering, what kind of cloud computer Epic is giving to everyone.
Oh, it's probably a T4. I mean, because the game is so performant, they could put it on whatever, right? Yeah, so it's probably something like a T4. It's just ubiquitous and all over the place.
Do you think that's also what MetaHumans runs on?
MetaHumans, I don't believe run on those. So that was AWS, and I believe they're using the G5 instances, which are like their A4500 equivalents. But there's not very many of them, and that's why they had to roll it out in beta. I don't know. They might have switched it so that the MetaHuman creator is no longer in like the cinematic mode. I haven't used it in a while. You've used it way more recently than I have, so I'm not sure, but it's probably something to that extent.
Cool. All right. Should we move on to things we liked about 2022 and things we hope for in 2023?
Let's do it. You first.
Hey, it came out in 2022? Unreal Engine 5. I actually had to just Google it.
Cop out. Come on.
No, well, hold on, because so much has happened since Unreal Engine 5 came out in May that a part of my brain was like, wait, maybe it came out in 2021. And to be fair, the early access version of it did. But the number of improvements and features and all the stuff coming on with Unreal Engine 5.1 now, and Lumen and Nanite expanding to foliage, and stuff on the horizon for 5.2, which, by the way, anyone can download the source code off of GitHub. I saw a preview today of like skeletal meshes working with Nanite, which is super exciting.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the demos that came out too, like the Matrix City sample demo, which continues to be an incredible source of inspiration as I dive into all the ways that city is made. The Lyra multiplayer demo is incredible and has taught me so much about how Epic Online Services work. Those have been some major highlights for me. And OpenXR from the VR side really getting more of a foothold. So it's becoming easier and easier to create like one Unreal Engine experience. And this is something that I really liked about Unity back when I was more focused on Unity. And Unreal Engine is very much catching up on this, that you can create a single experience and pretty easily now export it as a, web-based experience, a Windows experience, a Mac experience, a VR experience for different headsets, standalone versus PC versus Windows mixed reality or Vive or Vario. So I'm really glad to see some kinds of standards evolving, and maybe skipping ahead a little bit to what I hope in 2023. It might not happen. It could absolutely not happen, but there's a lot of signs that point to Apple finally releasing a VR headset. And because of all the beef between Apple and Epic Games, like, I'm so worried that it's going to be, here's the worst case scenario. It's an incredible headset that's a super locked down walled garden, and they don't support Unreal Engine. So it's my hope.
They have to. They have to.
Do they?
They have to support Unreal Engine. They got to play nice on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, but I keep thinking about that, how much that would suck if that becomes like the new de facto standard headset. And they're like, yeah, we actually aren't going to let Epic do anything on this.
Yeah, so, no, I get the feeling they will. I mean, at least I hope.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I'd also just like to see Apple embrace OpenXR. I think OpenXR is a wonderful standard, and so many great companies have said, yeah, sure, we want to make this unified standard for making it so a trigger is a trigger is a trigger across all these devices. And it doesn't look like Apple will buy into that. So it's
if I remember clearly, Apple is in Kronos Group, right? Aren't they?
Are they? I'm gonna Google that.
Yeah, I'm way ahead of you, man. Let's see. Who's in the Kronos Group? Oh, yep, they are.
Okay.
So they're there. They know. So is Epic.
Yeah.
They're there.
All right.
Some of them can play nice. I think that it would be very silly of Apple to piss off developers and creators in that way. They've never really done that to creators, at least. The consumers, yeah, fuck those guys. But creators, developers, they know not to piss off in general.
To be clear, though, I am seeing all these statements saying, like, yes, Apple is a member of the Kronos Group, but with the OpenXR spec, they have a list of the companies that have agreed to the OpenXR spec.
And Apple's not one of them.
Notably absent is Apple. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to remember, I guess, is that Apple has Metal, which is their own graphics API.
Yeah, that's right.
And my assumption is that anything that is going to be built on an Apple VR headset is going to be Metal. That sounds really like I'm talking
really
about
metal.
Yeah, it's gonna be Metal because they want it to run on multiple devices, right? Like, and that makes sense. If I was Apple, I would do the same thing, right? Like, I have this ecosystem built around this graphics API that honestly has never really seen the light of day for the most part. Like, it's really just been used for like 2D animations inside of apps. Yeah. But we have these huge GPUs in our phone that are like sitting completely idle.
That's true.
So it would be silly of them to not utilize the standards that they've built and have been working on for so long. So I mean, that's not necessarily a factor into OpenXR as a VR runtime, but certainly, you have to imagine their own runtime is an Apple runtime.
Yeah.
It might, if I had to guess, if I had to shoot a guess for 2023, it's that Apple allows you to it has some easy process for converting OpenXR projects to their ecosystem or something like that. And then once you're in their ecosystem, everything's beautiful, right? Like, I mean, that's what they do, right? So that'd be my guess. But sorry, I cut you off. Give us some more predictions for next year.
Yeah, well, let's go back and forth a little bit. So yeah, now something you liked about 2022 or something you're excited about for 2023?
I mean, I'm going to start with the cliches as well, which is the Lumen and Nanite. I can't explain how important those are going to be for creators in the future. Just really kind of, it's going to feel like the way we used to do things was like developing with like no arms, no legs, no eyes, because it's really the amount of time you spent inside of Unreal optimizing was, for people like me and for people like Alex, like that was part of the fun. I don't know. For me, at least, it was definitely part of the fun. I really liked that. That's how I learned a lot about Unreal Engine. But at the end of the day, I don't need that to create things. Like, I don't need that process in order to build things, to kind of build a vision of what I want. And I'm excited for the folks who are going to come to this ecosystem, not have to worry about all that. Like, skip to the good part. I think that's great for Unreal. I think that's great for creators. I'm really excited about that.
Real quick, for those who don't know, I've been teaching my kids, the basics of Unreal and VR for a long time. And my 7-year-old, he's working on this dragon game in Unreal, and I'm showing him some of the pieces of how it's set up, and I was explaining, oh, the dragon's very high poly, so we should probably create some levels of detail. And he's like, oh, what's levels of detail? And I started to explain it, and then I kind of stopped myself, and I was like, you know what, this is not going to matter for you. Let's just say that, you know, I'm going to do a thing real quick that's important now, probably won't matter at all a year from now. And he's like, okay.
Sounds great. Yeah. I mean, in reality, that's probably true to some extent, or at least you won't have to think about it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. So I think that's really exciting for me to give a prediction for next year. I mean, one of the big things that kind of came into the spotlight at the end of this year was AI, AI art. And there's a huge dialogue here. And I think we spoke briefly about it and kind of how it relates to other evolutions of art. And I won't even attempt to claim that everything that is going on is ethical or is the right way for this technology to influence creatives. I won't make that argument at all. But what I will say is that similar to how Lumen and Nanite simplified this process and simplified the ways in which folks can create, I'm really excited for this next year to see where things go to making tools even more accessible, to making 3D content more accessible. You know, YouTube made video accessible and made it so that people could have careers off of cell phones and, you know, dial-up internet, right? What can we do with that next step for 3D content? I think there's a huge window there that I think AI is going to play a big part in, because the more that people are able to just express themselves and shape and tune and sort of develop a vision instead of thinking about all the bells and whistles, I think will introduce a lot of people to this ecosystem. And I'm excited to see what people come up with, even if it's stuff that I don't necessarily like. You know, that's part of the process. Is people are going to be we're going to see explosions of content in this next year of stuff that, you know, we probably won't like, we probably won't think is very creative, won't think is very interesting. But then I promise you, there will come a point where people start to really innovate with this stuff, or really start to push boundaries, or there's an individual who builds this amazing project that he just simply could not have done on his time and budget if it wasn't for the sorts of tools assisting them. And I think that's going to be really exciting to see.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the early days of the internet very clearly, just feeling like, oh, there's so many terrible GeoCities websites everywhere.
Yeah.
But, you know, every so often you'd find some gem of someone who like really figured out how to harness the tools available at the time to create something that was, I remember seeing someone's like tour of their house that like gave this whole breakdown of the history of their house and the renovations they were doing and the photos and drawings that they all had done through the website. It felt almost like playing a video game. And, you know, there will always be people who do that kind of thing. You're also making me think about a quote I saw someone say where they're like, you know, I see a lot of people trying to use GPT-3 and different AI systems to try to replace the job of a smart person, when really the best way to use it is to imagine what you could do if you had infinite dumb people.
Yeah.
And to utilize it in that kind of way where you actually can accomplish sometimes very mundane tasks, sometimes actually fairly sophisticated tasks with these tools behind you, whether it's for art, whether it's for code. Jacob, have you seen some of the examples of people using AI to actually write code for them?
Oh yeah. So I mean, to be fully transparent, I've been using GitHub Copilot for a long time now. And if there are programmers out there who spend time in an IDE, GitHub Copilot is great, because when you need to write just a stupid function that just does something and you're just like, I don't want to deal with this. You just write a comment, you hit tab, and it just spits out something decent.
Wow.
And you know what? Initially, I was very critical. You know, I'd go in and check it. Now I feel confident enough where I'll say, that looks good enough, and I'll just run it and see what happens. Like I'll just say, let's just see if it works first. Like I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. And a lot of the times I feel like I can build off of it. Right now with ChatGPT, it goes a step further in that it has way more contextual processing kind of capabilities, in the sense that you can give it a prompt. You can say, hey, could you do that, but a little different? And that's a really cool feature to have as a developer. So for example, I was working on a project. I had to write a regex. So for folks who don't know what regex is, in programming, if you have like strings of characters and you want to identify parts of it, or you kind of want to like pattern match on different sequences of characters, you use a regex. It's like just a ubiquitous thing. Every programmer hates writing regexes because it's just not very intuitive. You got to remember all these symbols. You got to remember all this back propagation, all this stuff. I went into ChatGPT and said, hey, could you write me a regex that does this, 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 and this? And it just spat one out, and it worked first try. And that to me was like, I would have spent hours just like figuring out which symbol to put where, and just like doing one, and it just spat it out. And that's the kind of stuff that I really love. Now, in reality, it's going to accomplish more than that, of course. I mean, that's a very limited example. But we're going to see that a lot of roles right now that are considered highly technical are going to be more creative, is my guess. Right? We're going to see people become more, curatorial in their role, really, than necessarily have to have all the technical background. Of course, if you're a cybersecurity expert, or you're someone who's really interested in those fine details, you're probably pretty worried, because the propensity for example, an AI to introduce a bug into the entire world's code base is quite possible. It's there, right? And the people who are making these models know that. So we'll see how this develops, but certainly it's insanity to watch.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of this in Unreal with people using GPT-3, for example, to create like dialogue trees for characters.
You can have it create blueprints. Did you know this?
I know. I was just going to ask you, have you seen anyone do this for like blueprints or C++?
Yes, you can ask it for a blueprint that does X, Y, Z, and because it's text, it can do it.
Wow.
You can have it. Yeah,
that's
and
GitHub Copilot that can do that, or a different one?
No, ChatGPT.
Oh, ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. Okay. If you ask ChatGPT to write you a blueprint that prints X, Y, Z to the, it can't do anything crazy,
but still, like, remind me how to make a raycast that can do a line trace and tell me what
do the math. Like if you can have it do the math for you instantly, you can have it write HLSL. You can have it. Yeah, it's
That's
pretty
really
cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So like I said, I think it's going to become, a lot of roles are going to become more curatorial. They're going to become less technical. And I had a long conversation with my partner about this, because my background is that I would consider myself a technical person, but at the end of the day, like my passion is to create create art, or assist other people in doing that. Like that's really how I got into the position I'm at, is because I really enjoy giving other people the tools to go out and create things. Like I find that really empowering. And part of me says, this is maybe a bit of a sad moment for some people. Like this is going to be a very sad moment for example, like in compositing and VFX, like every day people spend hours and hours and hours, rotoscoping, cutting people out. I think we talked about this.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Cutting people out. Those people probably won't be doing that, in a little bit. And that's going to mean some amount of devastation. We'll have to see. So I guess I'm a bit conflicted, but
yeah, but you hope that people can then take their skills elsewhere. I think a lot about. I think we already mentioned it, the excellent Light and Magic documentary series on Disney Plus, and you see like right around the time of Jurassic Park coming out, you have Phil Tippett and all these amazing like stop motion animators who suddenly felt like they're out of the job because of what CG could do. But a lot of them then went on to learn how to use the tools that still helped create the CG dinosaurs. And, they could still go on to do kind of hybrid versions of stop motion and CG. And you always want to hope that kind of retraining will be possible for people, that the skills don't become obsolete. They just need to be like pivoted a little bit in a different direction.
Yeah, that's obviously the hope. I think we should be realistic about what the outcomes here are, though, because technology doesn't, once the cat's out of the bag, it doesn't go back. Like that's just not how it works, right? Like you can pass laws about restricting, the use of technology. You can do all those things, but it doesn't usually work. It just doesn't work that way. And obviously also legislation and people's livelihoods. Like people's livelihoods don't wait for legislation, I should say.
That's true.
Right. In the sense that, we saw these huge image models come out with tons of images that were not, given to them or given the rights by artists.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of incredible lawsuits, I'm sure, that are going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's some people are going to get thrown under the bus. There's just no way to put that nicely. And that's a really unfortunate part of what's going to happen. But, at some point, we got to accept it to some extent.
I know. And I know this would be very hard to do because of the level of training that people would be lacking. I'm thinking about like how, when you have like an image AI system like Midjourney or DALL-E, that you are scouring, millions and millions of images to create that model. And some people would actually make the case that it kind of in some ways makes things look kind of samey, but I would love to see kind of an opt-in artist consortium where like you agree to like, here's all my artwork, I'm okay with it being trained in here, and you get some amount of like, anytime an image is created that was using some amount of what it trained on with your model, there's some kind of little royalty that comes from that. And maybe it becomes like Spotify and it's not actually like that much in the end, but at least something that just starts to acknowledge all the incredible artists that this is being built on the backs of.
Yeah, for sure. I actually have seen a few things like that. And if I can find the name, I'll shout out their platform.
Please. Yeah.
I think this is one of the things. I don't know if this is a feature of their platform or actually, because I don't know that, I'm maybe not going to shout them out. But what I will say is that there are folks who are thinking about this. I don't have explicit permission to share their product roadmap, so I'm not going to do that. But there are some cool people doing that. And I think there are plenty of ways in which we can opt in artists to the process. But fundamentally, a lot of people, including ourselves, are going to have to adapt and change. Unreal Engine is an incredible tool and it can do a lot. But there are pieces of this process. I mean, with Lumen and Nanite, like we spent a lot of time learning that stuff. And we don't need to know it anymore, right? Like, what does that mean for us, right? In the same way that there's going to be other technological advancements that are going to come in and replace the need for certain processes or thought process, ways of thinking of things. So that's my prediction. But I hope that we get some clarity or we see a little further into this process and see that it's maybe not as bad as it's kind of it appears on the surface.
I agree. I'm also super distracted because I'm just going to share my screen for a second.
Sure.
Even though we haven't shared our screen at all this whole discussion. I just got really excited by you saying we could do Blueprint. And the fact that it actually gave me like this description chat by chat. For those who are doing the audio version, I said, give me an Unreal Engine 5.1 blueprint code for getting a player's position in the game. Really simple ask, but maybe I'm blanking on how to do that. And what it says is to get the player's position in Unreal Engine 5 using Blueprint, you can use the Get Actor Location node. This node is available in the actor category of the Blueprint palette. Here's an example of how you can use this node to get the player's position. Step 1, and it actually goes through step by step, like what to actually do. And then it actually does like a little almost like ASCII version of what the blueprint would look like. Which is very cool. So what's interesting is it didn't actually give me the blueprint code, but it gave me like basically the nodes to use in order to achieve what I'm after, which is super cool and trippy.
Well, I will say the first step there, drag out a reference to the player character from the My Blueprint panel and promote it to a variable is nonsense.
Right. That's you can see like how all of that almost makes sense, but not quite.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's not quite there. I am curious though, if you ask it to generate the blueprint text that you can copy paste. Like, I don't know, try something.
First, I'll just ask it if it can do that.
No.
Oh, wait. Like,
you can have it generate C++ code. I know that. I've seen that a bunch. Yeah, maybe see if you can get it to generate the C++ class instead,
Sure.
or C++ blueprint or something. Yeah, AI. Okay.
Effector object. Here's an example. Sorry, I'm sure this is boring for anyone who's
Include
not
the
watching the live
header.
stream.
Yeah, for folks who are wondering, we're just watching ChatGPT generate
Yeah,
things.
it's
That's
just
what this
doing its
podcast is
thing.
now. It's just live
Oh, here's some
commenting
code.
ChatGPT.
Yeah, now there's
So
some actual
include
code.
game framework actor. That seems relatively okay. A player control.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. There's no class, so you wouldn't be able to use this anywhere.
Yeah.
But it is cool. It is cool. I'll give it that. Oh, Alex, you're
I know that was my phone dying, so I'm now just a blinky evolving Pokemon, as you said earlier.
All right. Well, with that, we should probably wrap up the episode. This is great.
That's the last
All
thing
right.
anyone has seen from me for the year 2022.
Yeah. Well, maybe just turn your camera off so we can wrap things up
Yeah,
with that.
sure.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Do you have any last predictions you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
I mean, I'm really hoping to see kind of alluding to what we were talking about earlier, like a web XR based version of the cloud streaming to make all the power of Unreal Engine, particularly in VR, more accessible to the masses. Because there's so many people now that have the standalone wireless headsets like the Quest, and a lot of them just don't know what they're missing out on because of the fact that they can't see Nanite and Lumen and all the goodness that Unreal Engine can offer only at the desktop level, and just being able to ubiquitize that to a mass market would be a wonderful thing that I'd love to be a part of helping out with in 2023. So I hope it happens.
Yeah, I would say my last prediction along those lines for this next year is that more and more stuff is going to become a part of the browser. I think that's a trend that we've seen a lot. Pixel streaming is one situation. Pixel streaming specific to Unreal Engine is one, but there's a lot more that can be done with that, and I'm excited to see kind of where that goes. So to the extent that we can make more and more applications, more and more types of not just creator applications, just applications in general. Make them accessible, deliver them, where people are, stuff like that. I think that's going to become more and more popular this next year. Would be my guess. To the extent that you're talking about. Well, awesome. Do you have any shout outs for this week that you want to mention? I have one that I remembered here right at the end. I won't hold you to it if you don't have any.
I mean, just because we were mentioning the AI thing, I wanted to give a shout out to Andrew Maximov and Promethean AI. Andrew's a very cool guy. I met in Sofia, Bulgaria at the Total Chaos conference. And he is a former Naughty Dog employee who started to develop an AI system in Unreal Engine for generating assets and environments. The first demo I saw him give in 2019 was, I think, inspired by Stranger Things. And he opened up a blank Unreal Engine project and just said, show me a bedroom of a kid from the 80s. And as Jacob was alluding to, potentially there being a future where it's more about curation than direct creation. He demonstrated a very cool workflow where it's like, okay, here's a bedroom that totally looks like it's from the 80s and it has all sorts of detail and knickknacks and posters on the wall and, ruffled bed sheets. And then he kind of showed like, okay, now maybe you modify this and you change things around and make it a little bit more in line what you want. But the idea here is it's a starting point. You're no longer stuck with a blank canvas. You have something to react to and something to go off of. And if you're someone like my wife, for example, talks about how she really likes editing things, but she doesn't necessarily like creating things from scratch. And so I think entering a world where you do get to kind of react to something and say like, oh, well, now that I see that as an example, I know what would make it better is very exciting.
Yeah, very cool. I need to check that out. Honestly, I don't know if I've seen his work, but awesome. My only shout out for this week is the announcement of Ken Levine's new game from Ghost Story called Judas that I'm very excited about. I'm a big BioShock fan, and that game announcement really got me excited to see some new content. And the reason I mention it here is it's an Unreal Engine game.
Oh,
So there
cool.
you go. Though I believe even BioShock was. I think
didn't know
BioShock
that.
was an early Unreal Engine game, if I'm not mistaken. I know Infinite was. BioShock Infinite certainly was. So, anyways, that's a fun shout out for this week.
Yeah, amazing. I always
Awesome.
like when I find out a game was made in Unreal Engine, I always like trying to figure out which version of Unreal
Oh,
Engine it
yeah.
is. And so I think BioShock Infinite was Unreal Engine 3.
Infinite? No, that would have been early 4, I think. It's all a kit bash anyways, right? It's just like but I believe it was Unreal Engine 4, if I'm not mistaken. The original BioShock was certainly 3.
Cool.
Because it was one of the first released on Xbox 360 was the original BioShock.
Yeah.
Well, anyways,
cool.
we're getting distracted.
Some shout outs. Yeah, we're probably getting a little bit sleepy. To all a good night and that kind of good stuff. I hope everyone has a wonderful holiday, and I hope it's been a good 2022 for you, and I hope you have an amazing 2023. You too,
Yes.
Jacob. Not just our
Thank you.
audience.
You too, Alex, as well. For those folks who have made it to this point, like, subscribe, all that junk, and definitely have a great year. We'll see ya. We'll see ya in 2023.
Yeah.
All right.
Cheers. Bye all.